If you watch a TV show, especially in sci-fi and fantasy, you watch a TV show and it tends to be maybe a little lower budget and has to go on for a couple of seasons, and especially it has a more kind of lighter, happier, kind of more positive note to it, not so like dark and gritty. You might notice that kind of certain storylines kind of get repeated. I'm not talking like character tropes or like specific lines or like set pieces or prompts. I'm talking kind of like storylines. So that leads into tonight's topic, which is genre-bending episodes and weirdly specific repeated gimmicks in TV shows. They don't always appear in just sci-fi and fantasy, not just in kind of geek media. The flashback. And no, that graphic is not backwards. So the flashback, again, is exactly what it sounds like. The episode's going along, but they flash back to in the past so you can get some insight into a character development or to kind of fill in gaps in the mythology. Some shows rely heavily on it, some don't. They just have like little bits and pieces. But Firefly, Joss Whedon's Firefly, there are two ways to do the flashback that I really like the way Firefly did it. One of them, very beginning of the episode, comes up, you just see Captain Malcolm Reynolds there sitting naked on a rock in the middle of the desert. And he's just like, yep. And then boom, you cut backward, and then you cut back in time to see kind of how we got there. That's a good use of flashback, because it's a good way, you just say it right off the bat in an episode, that grabs people's attention. You're like, what? How did that happen? I gotta find out. That's good. But then there's also the flashback in Firefly, where it's literally just going through the episode, but then it cuts back in time to where each crew member of the Serenity, how they got on board. So again, that's just two ways to do a flashback. And then the next one is the bottle episode. Usually the episode happens with kind of the core cast and already existing set pieces. It's a good way just to kind of keep the keep production, within budgetary constraints. But it can be really good in just getting the characters to kind of bounce off each other, get some character insight. Two particular bottle episodes that I want to give a shout out to. Number one, The Defenders. I believe it's episode 4 of The Defenders. After this episode, the whole thing just kind of went downhill. But I personally found this episode, it's mostly The Defenders. They've had that big, cool hallway fight scene, but then they escaped to the Chinese restaurant in the next episode. It's really where you got to just sat down, like, no, these are the characters, plenty of banter, one-liners. I thought that was the best episode in the whole Defenders series. Then there is also Doctor Who Midnight. Episode of Midnight. It's just the Doctor in like a shuttle on a mysterious planet, and there's some sort of alien force, unknown alien force. It's like possessing people, and it's clearly out to get them all. And usually the Doctor's like ability to kind of take charge of a situation, his intellect, just being able to kind of lead everyone out of the trouble into safety. It actually backfires on him. It's done really well. Whew, great episode, even if it is a very bottle episode, just very small and contained and clearly done on the cheap. The documentary episode. Now again, this is one doesn't have to happen in sci-fi and fantasy. I know that was like The Mentalist did this, The West Wing did this. Again, it's exactly what it sounds like. There's a film crew making like a documentary that just happens to revolve around our main characters, and so they just make the documentary the episode. The holiday episode, yeah. So The Simpsons are famous for their Halloween and I dare say their Christmas episodes a little bit to an extent. Again, any genre really can do this. They can have a Christmas episode or a Halloween episode. In fact, I'd almost say it's kind of obligatory for some stuff like sitcoms. So we have the parallel universe or the alternate timeline. Lost. If you've seen Lost, you'd know there were like flashbacks, flash forwards, but then there was also the kind of alternate timeline. With the last season, there was kind of the flash sideways. I know Stranger Things, that has like the parallel universe, like the Upside Down, that's a huge part of the show. There's also Fringe, great part of their plotline, several seasons, the importance of the existence of this parallel universe. They also do end up creating an alternate timeline. Next up, the video game and virtual reality kind of gimmick. Warehouse 13 does this. That was actually a pretty good episode. I know the X-Files did one that was in like a virtual reality video game, very 90s. I never actually saw it, but I didn't know it existed. The beach episode. So I've been told that a beach episode in anime is pretty common. I know Avatar: The Last Airbender, it's not anime, but it has like homages, that sort of thing. So you get to see like some of the villains, all these main characters used to, fighting and bending and traveling all over the world, and they're just kind of trying to act like, normal teenagers, partying, playing sports. I loved it. Some people would say, like, oh, just kind of filler episode. We really didn't need this. I'm like, well, maybe, but I really think it worked. The time travel, time loop gimmick. Now, there are certain shows, obviously like Doctor Who, or say Legends of Tomorrow from the Arrowverse, their entire premise revolves around time travel. I know in Legends of Tomorrow, for example, Legends of Tomorrow does have a time loop episode. Very well done. One of the few kind of from later seasons I actually saw. But, and then time loop, the Groundhog Day, the person lives a day or an hour or something like that over and over and over again. The zombies pandemic. Obviously, we're during the middle of a pandemic, so it's interesting looking back, like, oh, hey, so that's pandemic, they're quarantining, interesting. So I know Fringe does an episode, they're not actually zombies in Fringe, which actually I kind of liked, but they were clearly infected with some strange disease that makes them want to infect others, and then once they're infected, once they spread, then the host dies. So it's actually quite intense. I really liked it. And then Warehouse 13 also has a zombies kind of episode. Again, they weren't actually zombies, but they kind of made fun of the fact that these aren't zombies, but they're so close to being zombies. Medical dramas, for example, they might have like, oh yeah, this person's got the plague or something like that, or there's a pandemic running through, so they gotta go there. So, and why not? Next up, the athlete cameo. So, starting off, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson was in an episode of Star Trek Voyager. Athletes definitely can bring a physicality to a role that sometimes your average actor cannot. Because, I mean, seriously, who else can really play a good, big, dominating villain figure? I've noticed that. So again, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson was in Star Trek Voyager for one episode. You can clearly tell it was him. They weren't trying to hide it. They were just making like, yes, here is the Rock in there. You have Aaron Rodgers. Again, I'm not really that into sports, but I'm pretty sure Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback for the Green Bay Packers, or was the quarterback for the Green Bay Packers. Again, I'm not sure, but Aaron Rodgers, football quarterback, he had a kind of a hidden cameo in Game of Thrones, the final season of Game of Thrones. And then you have Serena Williams, tennis star Serena Williams, had a very tiny role in Avatar: The Last Airbender and had again more of a cameo in Legend of Korra. Finally, in Warehouse 13, there is an episode where a wrestler named Cody Rhodes, he's kind of has a small role, and in that particular episode of Warehouse 13, that whole episode has another gimmick, the next one, which is the Freaky Friday body swap / body snatcher. You could also put on the umbrella of kind of like mind swap or possession, maybe. It could be like a sci-fi show. There's like an android that takes over for a real person, or through magic, there's like a evil clone or something like that that kind of gets swapped out for the actual person. Arrowverse in their Elseworlds, the big Elseworlds cross promo, Flash and Green Arrow switch kind of body switch powers. So that was it definitely got a few moments, but again, it just felt like kind of out there sometimes. So it can be done. I don't know if anyone ever saw the show Legend of the Seeker. It was an epic fantasy. I believe it's based on the book series The Sword of Truth. Two of the main heroic characters, they kind of get, through magic, their bodies kind of get possessed by two of their kind of counterparts from the past. Not the same people, but different, kind of the same people who had the roles as they did in the past, got taken over kind of through magic in the modern world. Again, kind of a body swap, possession, Freaky Friday kind of situation. So it was all a dream, or drug trip episode. Going back to Avatar: The Last Airbender, it wasn't a drug trip strictly speaking, but for all intents and purposes, it was basically the same thing. There's the episode right before the invasion, the Day of the Black Sun, where they're about to invade the Fire Nation. Aang just can't sleep. He's just really stressed out. He's panicking. He can't sleep, so he starts hallucinating. This is where you get the big Abba v Momo sword fight. So again, but that's exactly kind of what we're talking about here. So the drug trip, one episode that I specifically want to call out, because I think you'll definitely agree with me, and also this is my live stream, I can feel free to rant about anything I want. BBC Sherlock. If you remember, it was the Abominable Bride episode. They were going back to the Victorian era, so I thought, you know what? This is just going to be a special. You're just going to see the actors portraying the characters, but they're going to go back to Victorian era. They're going to have the period attire. They're going to be using lanterns and riding carriages. Like, this will be great. And then it turned out to be a drug trip on drugs, hallucinating all of this. I'm like, oh my gosh. They had me. Like, I was finally being pulled back in because, again, the previous season of Sherlock just didn't quite pull me in. The first two were great, but the third season just didn't really do it for me. But then The Abominable Bride was going great. I'm like, yes! And then it was all a drug trip. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's when I just officially kind of checked out. Like, I didn't have any high ambitions for BBC Sherlock anymore after that. This genre-bending episode is probably the most famous, probably the most well-known. It is the musical episode. It's exactly what it sounds like. Now, usually, in fact, I would say you kind of have to have, if you're going to do a musical episode, TV show writers, if you're going to make one, you have to go all in. If you're going to have an episode where there's singing and dancing and choreography and set pieces and original music, then you have to bring in the talent. You have to get people who know what they're doing and can make it work. Now, there is the Flash Supergirl musical episode crossover. With musical, you gotta go all in. And usually it does. Because people know that. People know that if you're gonna have a musical, you have to deliver. Because not everyone can sing. Not everyone can dance. Let's see who else did a musical episode. Oh man, there was Scrubs. There was even Stevens had it. All of the storytelling gimmicks and genre-bending episodes I just mentioned, there is one show that not only does these, but actively embraces these. Community does it all. Ladies and gentlemen, Community. It is on Netflix, so you can start watching it. Love that show. And they take it, they embrace it, they make it cheesy, and it absolutely works. They have a musical, they have drug trips, they take all, and not just these, and not just the ones I mentioned. They do so many more things, like make fun of like rom-coms and stuff like that. It's very meta, and it so works. If it's cheesy, then they take it, they make it cheesy, and they totally make it work. So that was my big spiel for the show Community. Go watch it.